Yves Missi and Antonio Reeves played well, but now Karlo Matkovic is the most important player for the Pelicans in Summer League. I'll tell you how he fits into the Pels rotation plans for next season. It's a Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday, we got two Summer League games to recap. No wins for the Pelicans, but that's not the most important thing here that we want to look at. It's the play of the players on the court, and Karlo Matkovic has been a little bit eye-opening to the point where he is now on the Pelicans roster. We'll break down what he brings to the team, what we expect his role to be this season. Then we'll look at Yves Missi, Antonio Reeves playing pretty well in Summer League, the two rookies for New Orleans, while Jordan Hawkins, second-year player, struggling a little bit. And then a couple of other notes from Summer League and interviews that we've heard. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And of course, become an everydayer of Locked On Pelicans. Listen Monday through Friday and tell a friend about the show. Make sure they're subscribed to know what's going on with this Pelicans team. So on Friday's show, I'd said there were three guys we got to watch for in Summer League, and that's it. And that was Yves Missi, Antonio Reeves, and Jordan Hawkins. And I did specifically talk about Karlo Matkovic, saying I just don't see him having much of a spot in the NBA. I did say, however, they may sign him to a minimum contract to fill out the big man rotation, and that might give us some insight on what to expect in terms of Brandon Ingram. More on that in the third segment of today's show. That part came true, and that kind of had been, if you had started kind of looking around on Friday, it really seemed like that was the direction things were probably going to go. The Pelicans need to fill out their roster. You have something called a second round minimum exception, which is basically a very cheap contract. It sounds like this is 3 years, $4.9 million. I think the first year is going to be something like $1.2 million. There's a third year team option on this as well. So it's a cheap signing. This doesn't hurt the Pelicans to do this whatsoever, even if Karlo doesn't end up being a significant piece. But after his two Summer League performances, you start to wonder if he could. Now, I'm going to be a little bit skeptical till I see him do it at the NBA level. Summer League is Summer League, and I don't put a ton of stock faith into those kind of performances. You know, maybe that's just being a little bit, naive or whatever you want to call with it, right? Jaded when it comes to Summer League too. But in general, it's Summer League. That's kind of the way I view it. When you talk to players, when you talk to coaches, they're not really expecting much out of some of these guys, and they don't know if these performances necessarily indicate much. Same thing with the G League. You don't hear a lot of people say this publicly, but if you talk to kind of people behind the scenes on stuff and ask them how much stock do you put in G League performances, not necessarily a ton. Like an NBA guy should be dominating the G League, right? Kira Lewis Jr. got sent down at one point and lit it up, and he wasn't really, was barely an NBA player. So there you have it. But Karlo in these two games for the Pelicans in Summer League has looked good and showing you a lot of mobility and athleticism that I think has been pretty good. In that first game, a loss for the Pelicans against the Minnesota Timberwolves, 81-74. And again, you're not running your full-on offense. You're running kind of scaled down things, so I don't put too much stock into wins and losses here. But off the bench, Karlo Matkovic put up 8 points, 8 rebounds on 4 of 7 shooting. He took 2 threes, didn't make them, but that's all right. Taking them's the important thing. The 8 rebounds was good. He moved well. I don't want to say dominated the game, but did his job out there, right? And at 6'11", being able to have some of the chase down blocks that he gives you, those putback dunks, sometimes kind of in the same play after he turned it over, admittedly. That does kind of bode well for another big that the Pelicans just really need, that kind of mobile big that maybe has a little bit more experience than Yves Missi, and more on Missi coming up a little bit later in the show. But Matkovic looked pretty good in this time. I'll be honest, he looked kind of eye-opening. Those were pretty athletic plays, and you're looking for athleticism on this team. And during that game, David Griffin gave an interview where he talked about how the Pelicans were happy with the center position, that he didn't necessarily feel they needed to go and add things to it, and they were happy with the group of guys that they have now, and he was definitely referring to Matkovic during that time. And I think that maybe hints a little bit at the future plans of maybe not seeing a Brandon Ingram trade come to fruition right now because they can't find the right deal because of that contract situation. So if you can't upgrade there, you need to fill out that spot. And if the Pelicans are pushing the luxury tax, and they are a little bit right now, this signing actually puts them into it in theory. If they're trying to avoid that or stay under the first apron, well, then signing this dude for super cheap and giving him a shot makes a ton of sense. And it's something that the Pelicans felt good enough to go and do. You heard David Griffin in that same interview say they want to play small, play fast. Matkovic can definitely run. That athleticism is there for him. Again, I'm going to be skeptical of it till I see it at the NBA level. Let's see him in preseason, not summer league. But he's showing a couple of the tools that you want to see from a big man. So is Yves Missi, and more on him in a moment. So that was a pretty kind of good game for Matkovic in Summer League. I don't think it's the type of thing that goes, oh, he should be the starter. I think you're looking at Daniel Tice being the starter on opening night for the Pelicans right now. But in the second game, a loss to the Orlando Magic where the Pelicans struggled in the fourth quarter, again, 91-86 loss. Him coming off the bench, again, 10 points. 2 of 6 shooting, not the best shooting night, 0 for 2 from 3, but got to the line. Again, looked mobile, looked athletic, being able to get those blocks, being able to play some defense and holding his own. Not a great defensive rebounding performance. He needs to fight a little bit harder on that. 4 boards, 3 of them offensive rebounds, just 1 defensive rebound. But what really stood out to you, or to me, and probably to you too, if you watched it, about Matkovic in this was the passing. 5 assists in this game was also really good. Being able to move the ball, at times play out of the high post, play on the perimeter, look for the open shooters. Those type of things are going to get you minutes on the court at the NBA level, I think, particularly in a Willie Green system where you need to be more than just a one-dimensional scorer. And so Matkovic showing off other skill sets here. We'll see how well he does truly at the NBA level. But given that their center options right now are Daniel Tice, Yves Missi, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, signing another body was absolutely the correct move, and the Pelicans have decided to either go cheap, which maybe, but also rely on internal development, internal growth, and someone that they drafted, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm really hopeful that he can really contribute because he's got good size, at least in terms of height. Maybe needs to bulk up a little bit, I think, for, hanging out with some of these centers in this just division, let alone the Western Conference. But he's shown off enough here that I think you go, okay, let's see him in the rotation and what it's going to look like next season. And he'll definitely get some minutes early on, having been with the squadron for a little while now. We'll see, how long his leash is going to be, but I'm excited to see more from Karlo in the future. Another guy two guys I'm actually really excited to see more about are Yves Missi and Antonio Reeves, the 2 most recent draftees for the Pelicans. Missi, I told you I've been coming around on that draft pick, and the second Summer League performance really is one that goes, oh, okay, I'm seeing exactly what I want to see from you. I'll tell y'all what that is. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I love sports, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop, but the playoffs are over. Some of the soccer tournaments are now over as well, so we're getting fewer games, and the sports just aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want, and all I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Whether it's Major League Baseball, that is in full swing right now. We have the Olympics coming up as well. Head over to FanDuel and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel.com. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and tell a friend about the show. Do they not know who Karlo Matkovic is? Get them clued in and listening to the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For your second listen, Locked On Saints training camp around the corner for the black and gold. Ross Jackson's going to be there, boots on the ground, making sense of everything that he's seen, giving you the insight you won't get anywhere else. Make sure Locked On Saints is your second listen today. So we're keeping the Summer League train going here. A couple of noteworthy performances from Pelicans rookies, I thought, seeing what you wanted. Let's start with Yves Missi in these two games. The first game against the Timberwolves, he did not look great and really struggled, I thought, to try and make an impact. 6 points, getting to the line, but 1 of 4 shooting. 8 rebounds, that looked okay, but struggled. The fouling wasn't great. That was something that I was worried about with him coming into the NBA. And one of the things we'd heard a lot about with him was, and one of the things that I'd said here and from talking to people around him and associated with him and the team was, this is a guy that I think we'll see rapid improvement from. And even when we did the Summer League preview on Friday, I said, I would not be shocked if you see improvement, like somewhat dramatically, from Yves Missi from game to game. His intelligence, the way he can take feedback and then internalize it and put it into action on the court really quickly, that quick turnaround time is something that people within this organization were really, really excited about. And so after that game, literally the first couple of minutes, right, that he's ever had kind of at this level, he struggled. He seemed to take that feedback and put in a much better performance, I thought, in the second game against the Orlando Magic. Yves Missi in that one was 4 of 7 shooting. He had 9 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds as well, 2 blocks, looking just athletic. What I wanted to see from him at the NBA level was look athletic, show off the tools that teams are looking for from your modern day 2024 center position. The athleticism, right? The strength. And a lot of the passing too. You've got to have that, I think, if you're a big man in the modern day NBA. And he did that. He really did. The 3 assists from him being able to kind of read was really good. His dribble moves are much better than I think what any of us were expecting. So these early practices for him really do matter, I think. And he was able to take whatever feedback the coaches were giving him, watching the film from the Summer League game, and putting it into action out there on the court. He cut down on the fouling too, just 1 in that game on Sunday, the loss to the Orlando Magic. Pelicans can never beat Orlando in any capacity. It is super annoying. But he looked really good. And again, I'm really starting to come around on this. I don't know if he's going to be right in the rotation at the beginning of the season. He might, but I don't know if he's going to have, a Derek Lively-esque impact just yet, because he won't be getting some of those minutes. And it took Lively a while to earn those minutes too. But you're starting to see some things from him that go, oh, okay, I get it. I see why the Pelicans were kind of fixated on him early on in the process and really liked him, and then really were excited to draft him at 21 overall. And if I'd be shocked if we don't see more improvement from him for the next game. So I liked what we saw from Yves Missi in this second game in particular, and to see the growth from one game to the next is a very encouraging sign, I thought. Again, needs to maybe get a little bit better on the defensive boards. That's probably going to go for this entire team. In Summer League here, Summer League's, again, just weird rosters, weird fits, those sorts of things. But he looked pretty sharp, and I was pretty happy. The dribble skills were there. He moves in traffic pretty well, and that was a little bit eye-opening. So I would be just giving him the ball an absolute ton in Summer League, because there's no reason not to. Now there's 4 guys, right, that we are looking at here with the addition of Karlo Matkovic. But Yves Missi looking good, like we were kind of expecting him to do if you listen to the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. The other player that I was really, really curious about was going to be Antonio Reeves and what he would look like for this team. He has looked pretty good. The scoring and the shooting hasn't entirely been there through these 2 games. That first game, he went 2 of 10 from the field, just 1 of 4 from 3, finished with 9 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 turnovers. Turnovers kind of plaguing the guards here and the wings for New Orleans right now. But he was aggressive. He showed that he can try and do it at all 3 levels. Got to the line, took threes, and then, can get to some of those mid-range spots and take those when they're there. Same game, second thing, shot significantly better. 12 points on 6 of 11 shooting, was 0 for 4 from 3. When that three-point shot starts to fall, this guy looks like he could be a bit of a microwave scorer. What I liked most about him, and what I thought was most impressive about him, even if the numbers don't necessarily jump out at you, is he's able to get his shot off. He's able to get his shot off and get to his spots and go and get those looks and take those looks. That's not necessarily the easiest thing to be able to do when you're making an adjustment and kind of coming up a level. And he did play 5 years in college, and that does say that he's probably more experienced than some of these other guys, and why you're kind of seeing that. He looks more seasoned, more experienced than a lot of the other guys that we're seeing out there on the court, whether it's with the Pelicans or with some of the other teams as well. So it's not really a shock that he's able to kind of get those looks and the ball's just not falling. That's process versus results, and looking at that and keeping in mind how important the process is over just looking at the results and be like, oh, the dude can't shoot, right? No, he's actually getting good looks, and that's the important thing, and his form looks good. If you're an everydayer, you knew I was pretty high on him. I told you to keep an eye on him as an undrafted guy, and he got drafted, and the Pels were the team to do it. So I'm pretty high on him. I think he's going to have a spot with the team. He's not officially signed to the roster just yet. That'll probably come eventually. But they also still might want to figure out exactly what they're going to do with him and what the developmental plan will be. But we'll see more of him in Summer League for sure. So we're going to split this next guy into right now and then the next segment too, and that's Jordan Hawkins, because for this team, he's arguably the leader, right? Coming in, the most experienced guy, it feels like, having played significant NBA minutes last season. And he's been a little bit underwhelming so far in Summer League. The shot hasn't been falling. Again, I'm not really worried about that because we know that Jordan Hawkins is capable of being a very good shooter. That first game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, 18 points, but on 6 of 21 shooting, just 2 of 8 from 3. But he did the other things that you want to see in that game. 7 rebounds from him was pretty good. 3 assists, at times trying to be a point guard, the playmaker for that team too, I thought was an important thing for them to really look at, and for him to go out there and show that he was capable of doing it. The defense wasn't too bad either from him in that, but you're starting to see some limitations with the offensive game. 4 turnovers there. In the second Summer League game, he had 8 turnovers. You see him not handling physicality from the opponent well. And in the second game, again, the shot I think was a little bit better. 24 points on 6 of 18 shooting, but he was 1 of 9 at the half. So he finished 5 of 9. That's a much better number. And even when the shot wasn't falling, you saw him do a little bit of what Dyson Daniels did last year, which was like, I'm bigger, stronger, faster than you, and I played in the NBA, so I'm going to go to the line. I'm going to just drive and attack and go to the line because you're going to foul me. 10 of 11 from the free throw line is a pretty good stat to be able to see. The 8 turnovers aren't good, and I don't love him having 12 through 3 games here. Now, Karlo also had 7 in this game, but I don't love that, but I'm also not overly worried when these guys have such a high usage rate at times. And Hawkins here, no one else came anywhere close to the number of shot attempts that he had, right? 18 shot attempts. Antonio Reeves was 11, was the next closest. And that's not even counting like the non-shooting shot attempts that Hawkins has that don't count as a stat because he got fouled and went to the line for 2. So there's something to keep in mind with that high usage rate there. But I haven't been like blown away from Hawkins yet. I'm not overly worried about it. His role is going to be a shooter. And Willie Green gave an interview during this game talking about how they've got to get more threes up. Let's look at that and some Brandon Ingram talk coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by my favorite eBay Motors, and they're my favorite because my cars are running for them. My cars are super awesome because of eBay Motors as well. Whatever you're looking for, whether it's speed, style, power, eBay Motors has it. My old classic Corvette that I'm restoring, it's going to get some new exhaust to sound cooler. I'm thinking some side pipes on it, kind of coming out the side there. I'm going to get them on eBay Motors. That's the next project for the car. There's also a slight exhaust leak, so I need to just do it overall. But here's the thing. The car's almost 50 years old, and I'm able to get the parts easily on eBay Motors. The Jeep Wrangler that I drive, put a roof rack on it recently to be able to haul stuff around. eBay Motors as well. Whatever you're looking for, they're going to have it because they have over 122 million parts for your vehicle. And one of the reasons I keep going there is the eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. And I'd be broke if their prices weren't good. So with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home a big win. So keep your vehicle alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast here, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now for your second listen, the Locked On Sports Today free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the yelling. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we were just talking about Jordan Hawkins, and I'm not overly worried about him, right? It's summer league. It doesn't mean too much. Like his shot falls. We've seen it, When he was the #1 option against a Dallas Mavericks team, scored over 30 and led the Pelicans to a win. Like this dude is very capable of making shots and being that scorer. Summer League, maybe everyone's just a little bit rusty. Who knows? Hawkins is in the rotation going into next season because something is very apparent, and Willie Green gets this. Maybe gets it. Says the right thing. Said in an interview during this second game, we've got to get up more threes. Got to get more threes for the team next year. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing to really commit to that because, look, you've got to play shooters. And now maybe losing a guy like Najee Marshall, who wasn't a three-point specialist and was more of a defensive first guy, as opposed to offense, is gone. It's going to force Willie Green's hand. But this is Willie Green's time to show the growth, to show his adaptation of what this team needs. And if it's more shooting, then you've got to play shooters. You can't leave them glued on the bench. Now, I don't think Jordan Hawkins is the overall answer. Last year when a lot of people were kind of clamoring for him to play, I don't know if that was going to make a huge difference. It probably would have been worth it, and for some of the games or giving him more minutes just for development. But I don't think it was going to change the team's fortunes by playing Jordan Hawkins. Now, if you commit to playing more shooters in general, that's a different story. That's a different discussion. And that's something that Willie Green does need to do. They need to lean a little bit more offensively than they have in the past. Defense still matters. Defense very much still matters. But you got to score too, right? Like you can force, if you're losing, even if you force the opponent to miss every shot and you don't make shots, you don't have offensive players out there, you're not going to win the game. And that's been part of the problem here. So Willie Green is saying all of the right things, but we'll know early on if he's kind of living that, right? Embodying what he's saying, if they're just words or if there's action behind it, with him potentially playing Jordan Hawkins or not, because we've seen Hawkins be an elite shooter. His skill set fits really, really well with Zion Williamson. And one of the things you heard Willie Green say in that interview, and this is telling, more on this in a future show, is we're going to put the ball in Zion's hands a lot. Yes, they have DeJounte Murray, but it's still maybe going to be the Zion-centric offense. And you have Murray as your secondary guy. I like that. I think that's a good balance for this team here. But if you're going to play point Zion and put the ball in his hands, you need shooters around him. It's truly that simple. You've got to space the court. Hawkins is a guy that's going to do that. We don't need to get into the Matt Ryan stuff here. And if the Pelicans need to clear a roster spot or shave some money, he's a candidate to get waived, by the way. So there's that kind of in there too. But Hawkins is the guy. So whether or not his shot is falling here, this is someone that should be in the rotation, I think. And I'm not overly worried about him kind of struggling. The physicality, right, when he's kind of the #1 option, the point guard for the team, and that he's struggling with that, that's not going to be his role at the NBA level. So I don't know if it matters that much. You'd still like to not see it, certainly, right? Because he's on opposing scouting reports right now. But overall, just put him on the perimeter, let him move around. Let Zion draw 2, 3, 4 guys to the ball, then kick it out to him. Let him make open shots. I can live with that. We'll be happy with all of that. And we'll see as the roster starts to kind of maybe finalize here for the Pelicans a little bit. And it sounds like maybe it is, right? This is getting into one of the things that I wanted to talk about. Couple of things here, when it comes to Brandon Ingram. I mean, they're saying like he's going to be on the team, and I don't doubt that. I don't think his trade market has developed. This was something that I was worried about. And if you're an everydayer, you heard me talk about early in the offseason with this, that I do think that Brandon Ingram could be back on the team next season. I don't think they were like trying to run him out necessarily. I think he just wants to get paid. And we kind of talked about this in the show on Friday of you got steps that you've got to go to before you either split or end up kind of like reconciling and coming to some sort of an extension. And we're in the process of that right now. So it doesn't sound like, based off of Griff's comments, and even Willie Green's comments, that they're looking to trade Brandon Ingram for Jared Allen or planning on making a big splashy center position upgrade, and they're going to roll with what they have. I think that can be fine, right? The center is your fifth guy here. Just rebound hard, block some shots, and we'll be cool. And maybe you have that in Karlo Matkovic. Maybe you have that in Yves Missi. Daniel Tice is a very good screen setter and does some other pretty crafty things too. That's a useful guy to have. I think they can maybe kind of go, I don't want to say center by committee because you don't want to go like 4 guys in the game, but maybe you whittle it down to 2 guys and someone getting some relief minutes in there too. And given that that doesn't need to be a huge role in the team, like, okay, there you go. We'll still explore more Brandon Ingram trade teams. I think there's 1 or 2 teams out there that still make a ton of sense for potentially getting a deal done. And we'll see if, that changes as we get deeper into the off season right now. But I think New Orleans is kind of looking at their roster and being like, let's roll with it here. Now, a lot of this for the success to happen is going to be on Brandon Ingram. Willie Green saying we've got to take more threes. He doesn't have an excuse to not take threes this year. Like, there isn't one. And if he's going to do that and be more of a spot-up guy at times, which is just not what he's ever really done, go back to his time with Team USA where he struggled in that sort of role, we'll see. But the talent is here to be pretty good, I think. There's a lot of offensive firepower here. Ingram was good defensively last year. Zion is kind of bought in defensively. All of those things really matter. You also have Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray now. That makes up for CJ McCollum in the backcourt a little bit. There's a lot of reasons to like this roster, I think, and we'll see how it ends up finalizing and what it's going to be next year. But let's enjoy the Summer League performances because now maybe Antonio Reeves will be in the rotation. Yves Missi should get minutes sooner rather than later, in my opinion, based off of this game, that performance against the Orlando Magic. Pretty excited about the team. I hope you are too. It's a fun time here. They have a 2-way signing that we'll talk about a little bit more tomorrow. We'll look at some other things too. We'll keep covering Summer League here for you on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Karlo Crazy's where you at. He's on the team. He's going to have a role. Let me know what you think about him in the comments down below, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.